Chapter 18, Easter Sunday, Sail Ho, Wales, San Juan, Romance of Hyde Drogging, San Diego again. The next Sunday was Easter Sunday, and as there had been no liberty at San Pedro, it was our turn to go ashore and misspend another Sabbath. Soon after breakfast, a large boat filled with men in blue jackets, scarlet caps, and various colored underclothes, bound ashore on Liberty, left the Italian ship and passed under our stern. The men singing beautiful Italian boat songs all the way in fine full chorus. Among the songs I recognized the favorite, O Pescator del Onda. It brought back to my mind pianofortes, drawing rooms, young ladies singing, and 1,000 other things which as little befitted me, in my situation, to be thinking upon. Supposing that the whole day would be too long a time to spend ashore, as there was no place to which we could take a ride, we remained quietly on board until after dinner. We were then pulled ashore in the stern of the boat, and with orders to be on the beach at sundown, we took our way for the town. There everything wore the appearance of a holy day. The people were all dressed in their best, the men riding about on horseback among the houses, and the women sitting on carpets before the doors. Under the piazza of a pulperia, 2 men were seated, decked out with knots of ribbons and bouquets, and playing the violin and the Spanish guitar. These are the only instruments, with the exception of the drums and trumpets at Monterey, that I ever heard in California. And I suspect they play upon no others, for at a great fandango at which I was afterwards present, and where they mustered all the music they could find, there were 3 violins and 2 guitars and no other instrument. As it was now too near the middle of the day to see any dancing, and hearing that a bull was expected down from the country to be baited in the Presidio Square, in the course of an hour or 2 we took a long stroll among the houses, inquiring for an American who, we had been told, had married in the place and kept a shop. We were directed to a long, low building, at the end of which was a door with a sign over it in Spanish. Entering the shop, we found no one in it, and the whole had an empty, deserted appearance. In a few minutes the man made his appearance and apologized for having nothing to entertain us with, saying that he had had a fandango at his house the night before, and the people had eaten and drunk up everything. "Oh yes," said I, "Easter holy days." "No," said he, with a singular expression to his face. "I had a little daughter die the other day, and that's the custom of the country." Here I felt a little strangely, not knowing what to say, or whether to offer consolation or no, and was beginning to retire when he opened a side door and told us to walk in. Here I was no less astonished, for I found a large room filled with young girls from 3 or 4 years of age up to 15 and 16, dressed all in white with wreaths of flowers on their heads and bouquets in their hands. Following our conductor through all these girls, who were playing about in high spirits, we came to a table at the end of the room, covered with a white cloth on which lay a coffin about 3 feet long, with the body of his child. The coffin was lined on the outside with white cloth and on the inside with white satin, and was strewed with flowers. Through an open door we saw in another room a few elderly people in common dresses, while the benches and tables thrown up in a corner and the stained walls gave evident signs of the last night's high-go, feeling like Garrick between tragedy and comedy. In uncertainty of purpose and a little awkwardness, I asked the man when the funeral would take place, and being told that it would move toward the mission in about an hour, took my leave. To pass away the time, we took horses and rode down to the beach, and there found 3 or 4 Italian sailors, mounted and riding up and down on the hard sand at a furious rate. We joined them and found it fine sport. The beach gave us a stretch of a mile or more, and the horses flew over the smooth, hard sand, apparently invigorated and excited by the salt sea breeze, and by the continual roar and dashing of the breakers. That's enough of that shit. From the beach, we returned to the town, and finding that the funeral procession had moved, rode on and overtook it about halfway to the mission. Here was as peculiar a sight as we had seen before in the house, the one looking as much like a funeral procession as the other did like a house of mourning. The little coffin was borne by 8 girls who were continually relieved by others, running forward from the procession and taking their places. Behind it came a straggling company of girls dressed as before in white and flowers, and including, I should suppose by their numbers, nearly all the girls between 5 and 15 in the place. They played along on the way, frequently stopping and running all together to talk to someone or to pick up a flower, and then running on again to overtake the coffin. There were a few elderly women in common colors, and a herd of young men and boys, some on foot and others mounted, followed them, or walked or rode by their side, frequently interrupting them by jokes and questions. But the most singular thing of all was that 2 men walked, one on each side of the coffin, carrying muskets in their hands, which they continually loaded and fired into the air. Whether this was to keep off the evil spirits or not, I do not know. It was the only interpretation that I could put upon it. As we drew near the mission, we saw the great gate thrown open and the padre standing on the steps with a crucifix in hand. The mission is a large and deserted-looking place, the outbuildings going to ruin, and everything giving one the impression of decayed grandeur. A large stone fountain threw out pure water from 4 mouths into a basin before the church door, and we were on the point of riding up to let our horses drink when it occurred to us that it might be consecrated, and we forbore. Just at this moment, the bells set up their harsh, discordant clang, and the procession moved into the court. I was anxious to follow and see the ceremony, but the horse of one of my companions had become frightened and was tearing off toward the town, and having thrown his rider and got one of his feet caught in the saddle, which had slipped, was fast dragging and ripping it to pieces. Knowing that my shipmate could not speak a word of Spanish and fearing that he would get into difficulty, I was obliged to leave the ceremony and ride after him. I soon overtook him, trudging along, swearing at the horse and carrying the remains of the saddle which he had picked up on the road. Going to the owner of the horse, we made a settlement with him and found him surprisingly liberal. All parts of the saddle were brought back, and being capable of repair, he was satisfied with 6 reals. We thought it would have been a few dollars. We pointed to the horse, which was now halfway up on the mountains, but he shook his head, saying, "No import," and giving us to understand that he had plenty more. Having returned to the town, we saw a great crowd collected in the square before the principal pulperia, and riding up, found that all these people, men, women, and children, had been drawn together by a couple of bantam cocks. The cocks were in full tilt, springing into one another, and the people were as eager, laughing and shouting as though the combatants had been men. Bantam cocks. The hits keep coming with this motherfucker. Bantam cocks. There had been There had been a disappointment about the bull. He had broken his bail and taken himself off, and it was too late to get another. So the people were obliged to put up with a cockfight. One of the bantams having been knocked in the head and had an eye put out, he gave in, and two monstrous prize cocks were brought on. These were the object of the whole affair. The two bantams having been merely served up as a first course to collect the people together. Two fellows came into the ring. Holding the cocks in their arms and stroking them and running about on all fours, encouraging and setting them on. Bets ran high, and like most other contests, it remained for some time undecided. They both showed great pluck and fought probably better and longer than their masters would have done. Whether in the end it was the white or the red that beat, I do not recollect, but whichever it was, he strutted off with a true Vini Vidi Vici look, leaving the other lying panting on his beam ends. I think I shall move away from this window.